ADR. Promoting dialogue.
It's 6 p.m. in Dakar. Good evening and many thanks for staying tuned to West Africa Democracy Radio, broadcasting on 94.9 FM and around the world at wadr.org. This is Newslink. Coming up in the news. Global climate gathering COP30 gets underway in Brazil. Senegalese Prime Minister Sonko called for resilience amid rising economic hardship, sparked nationwide debate.
Facing its most complicated situation. Our debt is 139% of the GDP, which is very high.
African Union Commission calls for urgent international action on security crises in Mali, and in Liberia, opposition CDC accuses ruling Unity Party of political witch hunt and mismanagement.
There were no traceable basis by the two companies. Where this money came from, amounting to millions of dollar transactions, the company cannot answer these questions.
Please stay tuned for details of these stories and more.
West Africa Democracy Radio. It's you speaking.
My name is Hank Kulejanka. Many thanks for joining us this evening. This Monday, November 10th, marks the start of the 30th United Nations Climate Change Conference, COP. This year's COP is being held in Belém, Brazil. For the African continent, which is participating in this climate summit, the stakes are high, accounting for a tiny fraction of global greenhouse gas emissions, estimated at just 4%. Africa is demanding climate justice. Wadr reports.
COP30 is being held on the edge of the Amazon rainforest in Belém, Brazil. This choice, far from being accidental, carries powerful symbolic significance. Holding this conference on the doorstep of one of the world's largest forests underscores the importance of protecting vital ecosystems and preserving the environment. The global gathering is crucial to the African continent. Africa expects justice as it is forced to pay for damage it did not cause. In figures, Africa accounts for less than 4% of global greenhouse gas emissions. Every year, climate disaster reduces the GDP of many African countries by between 2% and 5%. The situation continues to anger African leaders. During the summit of heads of state held on the eve of COP30, Congolese President Felix Tshisekedi spoke out saying, in quote, "Those who have contributed the least to climate change are now paying the heaviest price. Our populations are affected by floods, extreme drought, erosion, and food insecurity. Meanwhile, funding remains insufficient, fragmented, and too often poorly targeted." End of quote. This observation was shared by several of his counterparts. This desire for justice is not new. At previous conferences, such as the one held last year in Azerbaijan, the countries of the Global South rejected the $300 billion annual budget to finance climate adaptation measures. They're demanding more, at least $1.3 trillion. African countries thus reject the idea of charity and instead advocate for reparations for damage for which they are not responsible. The international community is dragging its feet nearly 10 years after the adoption of the Paris Agreement to limit global warming. 10 years later, the time for assessment has arrived and it is now intertwined with the urgent need for action.
Imo Edet reporting. In Guinea, the Constitutional Court has published the provisional list of qualified candidates for the December 28, 2025 presidential election in the country. Out of 51 candidates submitted, only 9 were approved by the Apex Court, including that of the transitional president, General Mamadi Doumbouya. This announcement over the weekend marks a significant step in the political transition in Conakry following the 2021 coup that toppled Alpha Condé. Augustine Coley has the rest of the details.
General Mamadi Doumbouya's candidacy, submitted on November 3, was one of those formally approved despite strong opposition from principal political parties and groups. According to them, the Army General has grossly violated the charter establishing the transition, which bars Doumbouya and members of the junta from participating in future elections. However, Mamadi Doumbouya's candidacy has been boosted by widespread support from various civic groups and platforms under the umbrella of the GMD25 Synergy and the Alliance of Patriotic Forces. Besides General Doumbouya, the Constitutional Court accepted 8 other contenders for the presidential race, including Abdoulaye Yero Balde, Makali Kamara, Ibrahima Abe Sila, and Fayala Sana Milimono. Others are Abdoulaye Kuruma, Mohamed Nabi, Buna Keita, and Mohamed Sherif Tonkara. The Apex Court conversely disqualified the candidacy file of former Prime Minister Lassana Kouyaté alongside 30 other applications due to administrative or procedural issues. A newly adopted constitution from the September 2025 referendum imposes an age limit of 80 years for presidential candidates, effectively barring many veteran politicians from contention. With these 9 candidates officially validated, the Constitutional Court has set the stage for a pivotal election campaign in Guinea, which begins on November 28 and ends 24 hours before the polls.
Augustine Coley with that report. In neighboring Liberia, the Opposition Congress for Democratic Change (CDC) party has accused the government of engaging in a political witch hunt, corruption and mismanagement of the country's resources. In a statement released during the weekend, the CDC denounced that it called destructive and deceptive tactic employed by the ruling Unity Party administration to mask its massive governance failures. Tensions has escalated between the two major political parties in Liberia after the 2023 elections, characterized by the face-off between lawmakers from both sides at the legislature. WDR's Monrovia correspondent Abraham Parker reports.
The statement from the opposition CDC is in response to recent indictments of former officials under the immediate past administration by the Asset Recovery and Property Retrieval Task Force. According to ARED's investigation, more than 40 individuals, including Finda Bondo, former chief of protocol, to George Weah, were indicted on multiple charges of money laundering, theft of property, misuse of public funds, and criminal conspiracy, among others. Edwin Clark-Martin, chairperson of the task force, revealed that the former chief of protocol accumulated wealth totaling over $6.7 million and 845 million Liberian dollars, respectively.
There were several key factors who participated in all those accounts, amounting to 40%. There were no traceable business by the two companies. Where this money came from, amounting to millions of dollar transactions, the company cannot answer these questions.
The CDC alleges that the Unity Party government is targeting former officials of the party with what it termed as book or charges as part of a calculated political witch hunt. The party says it rejects through legal and political means the cases against Nora Finda-Bondo, John Upoti, and the former minister Tiaman Duncan Sawyer, the widow of a former interim president Dr. Amos Sawyer. It is expected that the indicted former state officials will be arrested in the coming days as recommended by the Asset Recovery Task Force. For Newslink on WADR, Abraham Parker, Monrovia.
While still in Liberia, President Joseph Boakai submitted the draft national budget for fiscal year 2026 to the national legislature, outlining a proposed total expenditure of $1.2 billion. The budget was formally presented to the House Speaker, Richard Kuhn, by Finance and Development Planning Minister Augustine P. Nagofon on behalf of the President. This submission complies with Section 1.71 of the 2019 Amendment and Restatement of the Public Financial Management Act of 2009, ensuring that the budget reaches the legislature within the required legal time frame. The proposed budget is largely reliant on domestic revenue, which constitutes 94% of the total. This includes tax revenue, non-tax revenue, a one-time meter sign on bonus, and contingent revenue. An estimated $280 million from the budget is allocated to projects such as agriculture, roads, education, sanitation, and tourism.
More stories coming up on West Africa Democracy Radio. Newslink continues.
Elsewhere in the Gambia, a naval patrol has intercepted a large canoe boat conveying at least 180 migrants. The interception took place in the early hours of Saturday, 9 November 2025, near Dog Island during routine naval patrols within Gambian territorial waters. The boat had set off on a perilous journey across the Mediterranean to reach Spain. Online news portal Inside Gambia, citing official reports, said a group consists of 163 Gambian nationals, 15 Senegalese, and 2 Guineans from Conakry. Now, in Senegal, the population has been urged to tighten its belts in the face of economic difficulties the country is experiencing. The country's Prime Minister Ousmane Sonko, during a large rally held over the weekend in Dakar by PASTEF, the ruling party called on Senegalese citizens to participate in the recovery of the national economy. A series of taxes levied on the population has been implemented. These include taxes on gambling, money transfers, alcohol, and tobacco, among others. Despite the already difficult economic context, why should Senegalese citizens support their government in the economic recovery effort? Well, Babu Meisa, a Senegalese economist and lecturer of economics at the SEC and the Job University in Dakar, share his insight.
This effort is meant to help the government get out of its difficulties because now everyone knows that the country is over-indebted. Through this measure, the state has secured about 2,000 billion CFA francs per year over the next 3 years. So it will be an extraordinary financial contribution to relieve the public treasury, even though we will have to repay between 4,000 and 5,000 billion CFA francs. But it is a real breath of fresh air, especially since the IMF has not yet provided budgetary support, and since Senegal is facing this situation alone. I believe this effort also deserves to be made by Senegalese citizens. The goal is to avoid falling into bankruptcy, meaning a collapse of the state. We still have salaries to pay, family allowances, student scholarships, and then the issues in agriculture and flooding. We still have to manage daily needs. The price of cigarettes has gone up by at least 200 francs. It is probably the same for alcohol. Gambling winnings are also being taxed, about 20% of winnings, and so on. These taxes are not very high. In fact, these are not things that affect the everyday lives of most Senegalese. These are what we call tax niches. They are not likely to trigger any popular protest. But if the government had touched rice or bread, then we will definitely hear from the Senegalese.
Well, we'll have more on this conversation on our guest interview segment. Meanwhile, in neighboring Mali, terrorists have been causing a full shortage for the past 2 months. They are carrying out numerous attacks against tanker trucks supplying fuel to the capital Bamako. This economic warfare, a new strategy employed by the JNIM terrorist group to cripple the national economy, was declared a few days ago by the Malian Foreign Minister Abdoulaye Diop. Mali has been severely affected by the security crisis in recent months, to the point where calls for solidarity are multiplying to prevent the entire country from falling under the control of terrorists. Abdullah Hassan reports.
The latest call for regional and continental solidarity to resolve the security crisis in Mali comes from former Senegalese Interior Minister Ali Ngouille Ndiaye. In an open letter to ECOWAS, the African Union, AU, and Mali's neighboring countries, he urges them to act so as not to allow Bamako to fall under the complete control of armed terrorist groups. The terrorists aim to isolate the capital Bamako, which will weaken all sectors of the Malian economy, including the Malian armed forces, says Ndiaye. A takeover of Bamako by the terrorists would undoubtedly impact the security of all countries bordering Mali, warns the former Senegalese Interior Minister. He deplores the silence of ECOWAS and the African Union in the face of the security situation, which has deteriorated considerably in recent months in Mali, and calls for an end to a wait-and-see approach. He also calls on Mali's neighbors, particularly Mauritania, Senegal, Guinea, Côte d'Ivoire and Algeria, for increased solidarity to save Mali. For months, several opinion leaders, civil society organizations, and humanitarian organizations have been calling for action to prevent the worst in Mali and also in the Central Sahel. The countries of the region have been affected by the terrorist crisis for a decade, resulting in thousands of deaths and the displacement of millions of people.
Abdullah Hassan with that report. Similarly, the chairperson of the African Union Commission has expressed deep concern over the rapidly deteriorating security situation in Mali and called for urgent international action. In a statement released this weekend, Mahmoud Ali Yusuf condemned the recent jihadist attacks against civilians in the country. The Al-Qaeda-linked Jamaat Nasr al-Islam wal-Muslimin (JNIM) has increased its assaults across Mali in recent months. The group has also imposed a blockade on Bamako in retaliation for the military banning fuel sales in rural areas. The blockade has squeezed Mali's fragile economy, with fuel trucks unable to enter the capital. The chairperson of the African Union Commission denounced severely worsened humanitarian conditions for civilian populations. He also condemned the abduction of 3 Egyptian nationals by JNIM and called for their immediate and unconditional release. In the past few weeks, several countries, including France and the United States, have urged their citizens to leave Mali. Mahmoud Ali Yusuf called for an international response based on cooperation and intelligence sharing to counter terrorism in the Sahel. You're listening to Newslink on West Africa Democracy Radio 94.9 FM Dakar. Here is a reminder of our top stories. Global climate gathering COP30 gets underway in Brazil. Senegalese Prime Minister Sonko's call for resilience amid rising economic hardship sparks a nation-wide debate. African Union Commission calls for urgent national action on security crisis in Mali. And in Liberia, opposition CDC accuses ruling Unity Party of political witch hunt and mismanagement. Still ahead, we do have guest interview and sports news. Please stay with us.
Fresh and breaking news all the time. Hear it first as the news breaks, only on West Africa Democracy Radio. Newslink continues.
The Economic Community of West African States, ECOWAS, in collaboration with Islamic scholars and organizations, has called for stronger unity and non-violent strategies to tackle terrorism and violent extremism. The call was made at the West African Islamic Conference on Security and Governance held in Abuja, Nigeria. At the 3-day event wrapped up on Thursday, participants and delegates identified poverty, unemployment, political marginalization, and weak governance as key drivers of radicalization in West Africa and the Sahel. WDR's Osman Omar has the rest of the details.
The advisory, released by the British Foreign, Commonwealth and Development Office, notes that insecurity is spreading across all regions with attacks targeting transport hubs, religious gatherings and humanitarian workers. It lists Borno, Yobe and Adamawa in the northeast and Zamfara and Katsina among the most dangerous states, and urges extreme caution in parts of Abuja where violent crime and protests are becoming more frequent. The warning follows a threat by U.S. President Donald Trump, who accused the Nigerian government of failing to stop the killing of Christians and hinted at possible punitive action. In a swift response, Nigeria's presidency dismissed claims of inaction, insisting that the country has made significant progress in restoring peace. It said terror-related deaths have dropped by 81% since 2015, crediting improved counterinsurgency efforts, enhanced coordination among security agencies, and growing cooperation with local communities. According to the government, more than 13,000 terrorists have been neutralized, and over 124,000 fighters and their families have surrendered to authorities in the past year. It also reported that over 2 million displaced persons have returned home under new resettlement and reconstruction schemes. Analysts say the growing exchange among world powers underscores how Nigeria's internal security crisis is increasingly becoming a matter of international concern, with implications for regional stability and global diplomacy. For Newslink on West Africa Democracy Radio, Usman Umar reporting from Abuja.
In Ghana, members of the minority in parliament have stayed their work hard during the ongoing vetting of acting Chief Justice Paul Bafo-Boni. The exercise, which began amid heightened tension between the majority and minority sides, was suspended briefly after hours of disagreement over procedural rules and the minority's description of the nominee as disputed. The vetting process has been marked by controversy following the recent removal of former Chief Justice Getu Tokono, a development that has drawn mixed reactions across the political divide. However, proceedings resumed shortly after the boycott, allowing the appointment committee to complete the vetting of the acting Chief Justice Bafo-Boni. Well, here is the minority leader Alexander Afono Bakin.
We hold a view that the judiciary is not the executive's enforcement arm. It is neither parliament's ally in political projects. It is a guardian of our constitution. the protector of our rights, the final arbiter of all our laws. Its independence is sacrosanct. Its integrity is non-negotiable. It is the oracle of justice emanating from the people of Ghana. Chairman, for all the reasons given, including the very actions of the majority leader, basically denying us every opportunity of expressing our opinion on an important national discourse. Be it known to you, Chairman, and the committee, and the country, that we, the minority caucus, hereby vote en bloc to reject the nominee. We cannot be part of a process that would give right to another and deny another of her bona fide as enshrined in the Constitution.
Ghana's minority leader Alexander Afonu Markin. Well, in Niger, General Abdurrahman Tiani has completed his tour of the interior of the country. He visited the town of Gaya, Tahur, and Dosso over the weekend, where he assured the population and local authorities of the state's efforts in the fight against insecurity. He also met with soldiers deployed in these areas who are engaged in the fight against terrorism. During his visit to Gaya, he addressed the closure of the border with Benin.
Politics, analysis on major news, social matters, and all. This is A Guest.
Now, back to our first story on Senegal. We do have Alhaji Amadou Samb, country lead Budget Senegal, to help us unpack the current economic situation in the country. Recall, over the weekend, the Prime Minister Ousmane Sonko called for citizens to tighten their belts amidst a wave of new taxes and mounting economic challenges, from rising living costs to increased levies on essentials like money transfers and consumer goods. Many Senegalese are feeling this strain. Well, so what's really driving these economic difficulties, and how effective might these new fiscal measures be in stabilizing the economy?
The Senegalese situation is very complicated. As I said, I'm going to focus on the economic situation. Senegalese economy is facing its most complicated situation. Now the debt, in the last report, which is the Mazar report, it has shown that our debt is 139% of the GDP, which is very high. We have never been there. Secondly, we cannot raise money in the international market. It's not possible. And thirdly, internally, the economic situation is very complicated. Therefore, we have two options. Okay. So, are we going to try to fight and do our best in order to rebase our economy so that the citizen can live better? Or are we going to try to speak to the IMF because the program of IMF is not ready yet? Or the main question for me is that, is our leaders really understand the real situation of the Senegalese economy? Because I hear that we have organizing political organization and political manifestation rally, but I don't think that we really understand the real situation of the country in terms of economy.
Well, you talked about rebasing. That is a very key issue in any country's economy, because rebasing will mean like starting all afresh to ensure that starting from the zero. How would that impact on the economic life of Senegalese? Because that may be the only option if the IMF program is taking time to come through.
This will have an impact, really. But we need to have what is called the civic citizenship, a fiscal citizenship, because we need to rebase everything. Even in the government, we need to change their, try to see the salaries of some directions. Some money waxing need to be, rebased. And I think in terms of fiscality, we need to change our fiscal framework, because all the Senegalese people, those who must pay taxes, some of them are not paying that yet. We need to re-see the foundation of our economy. And I think citizens should do sacrifice But I think the government should do the first sacrifice for going on that.
Do you think most Senegalese are not too concerned about how the economy is, so long as the prices of bread, the prices of sugar, and the prices of rice are not touched?
If you still see money that the government is using, mainly in the National Assembly, where they want to buy new cars and others, and also we don't understand that some taxes, if the population claim that they should not pay taxes, I think they don't understand the situation. The real situation that we have now is that IMF, that is the highest body in terms of economy, has pulled our program in order to give us the time to change and reshape our economic and fiscal framework. This is the first situation. The second situation is that we have a high debt. And I think that the citizen need to be sensitized according to this situation.
Some this country lead budget Senegal. Well, in sports, let's begin with athletics, because the International Olympic Committee is considering a blanket ban on transgender women competing in female sports categories. IOC President Christy Coventry has made it a campaign priority, with a possible announcement in 2026. While no final decision has been made, IOC medical findings suggest athletes born male retain physiological advantages after hormone treatment. Any new rules are expected before the 2028 Los Angeles Games. Now, in football, Nigeria's Super Eagles continue training in Rabat ahead of their World Cup playoff against Gabon. New arrivals Ademola Lookman, Semi Ajayi, Stanley Wabali, and Amas Abasoji joined 10 others, including Alex Iwobi and Calvin Bursey. Lookman's presence is seen as a major boost before the Thursday's clash. And CAF and Puma have revealed E3, the official match ball for Africa Cup of Nations AFCON 2025 in Morocco. Inspired by Moroccan Jelij mosaic, it symbolizes African unity and passion. Well, we've come to the end of this edition of Newslink on West Africa Democracy Radio, broadcasting from Dakar, Senegal. Thank you for listening, and many thanks to Falilou Sow and Maudu Juve for the technical assistance. Do interact with us via social media platforms, X and Instagram, at Facebook at WADR News, and then Facebook WADR English Service. I am Sankula Janko. Good evening.
And many thanks to you for listening to Newslink via Hot 104.3 FM, New Me FM 94.0,
Hilltop Radio 104.7 FM,
and Veritas Radio 102.9 in Banjul, the Gambia. We also appreciate our listeners in Liberia via Alternative Youth Radio 98.9 FM, Lofa County,
Radio Kagama 94.5 FM, Niba County, DCN Radio 91.3 FM, Riverside County, Wakat FM Radio, Banga, Liberia, Radio Gulf FM 91.3 Sierra Leone in Nigeria, and Love 104.5 FM Abuja.
For you listening via Radio Pad 95.1 Damango, Savannah region, and on Royals FM 104.7 Wenchi, Ghana, we say a big thank you. Remember, West Africa Democracy Radio is all about you, your views, and your opinions.